Hello my friends, welcome back. So, it's that time of year again. Shadows are drawing in, the leaves are turning, the spirits of the other side walk abroad. That's right, it's Halloween, or as some people like to say it, Samhain. So in this video I'd like to talk about some of the pagan and pre-Christian influences of our contemporary festival of Halloween. I'd also like to talk about Samhain in the context of the pagan wheel of the year, which is a contemporary pagan concept as much as an ancient one. So in the pagan imagination, there is something called the Wheel of the Year. This is based on the seasonal cycle of our ancestors, who are obviously agricultural people, and the changes of the seasons were very important to their livelihoods. So you've got the winter solstice, the summer solstice, the autumn and spring equinox, which is now sort of Easter and Christmas respectively. Between those you've got the cross-quarter days, which are usually more associated with a Celtic worldview. So those are Imbolc, Beltane, Lunasa and Samhain, which we now call Halloween. Samhain in Irish means summer's end. So that's what this day is all about. It's about the end of summer. It also possibly means a gathering. So it's a big gathering where the community comes together. Gathering might also suggest a gathering in of spirits, because my friends, this time of year is a time when I guess you could say the barriers between this world and other worlds are very, very thin. In the Celtic worldview, there are multiple other worlds. And the way I often think about this is a bit like the contemporary scientific concept of parallel universes. You know, these other realms, these she realms, these fairy realms where people like us but not like us live. They occupy the same physical space, right? But they're on a different kind of frequency. But sometimes we can tune into that frequency and see this other world and these beings. That's usually at certain places, certain magical or sacred places, like certain lakes or rivers. In between doorways is a liminal space, but also certain times of year, the hinge of the year, which is now Samhain or Halloween, and the other side of the wheel of the year, which is Beltane. And these are the two big Celtic fire festivals. Not just Celtic as well, other cultures would have had fire festivals, maybe on slightly different days. But in the pagan worldview, this was one of the main fire festivals. And a time when the dead, the spirits of the dead, would be walking abroad. In a lot of traditions, they come out of the she mounds. Again, the she are a slightly different class of being. They're not really spirits of the dead. They're spirits of the fairies, of the other, sometimes demoted classes of God. But whatever spirit, whatever discarnate entity will be more prevalent at this time of year, usually from this time of year until Yule, or the winter solstice, the next knock on. So some people say that the spirits of the dead are roaming from Samhain to winter solstice on the Raven Road, where they return back into the body of the earth just before the sun emerges again. So again, in the Celtic worldview, the beginning of things is the night before. So Samhain now begins on the evening of October the 31st. And the new year, some say, begins here. It begins in winter, not in New Year, not in Yule, not in the spring, but here at the onset of winter, because winter is night to the year. This time is also the time of the Cailleach, or the spirit of winter. This might be a more contemporary thing in the pagan imagination and the folkloric worldview, the Cailleach. I don't think so. I think it's very, very, very old. I think it's part of a Indo-European group of spirits. But the spirit of winter, the Cailleach, rules these winter months until either Imbolc or Beltane next year. It's a bit like in more English folk custom, the Holly King who rules winter. So this is a liminal time of year. This is also a very good time of year for divination. There were often divination practices done at this time of year, often involving apples and apple bobbing. The contemporary custom of apple bobbing possibly comes from this time of year. Also for working acts of magic. That's why witches might often be associated with this time of year, or any cunning person might be looking to do their spell work or their divination work at this time of year, just because the gateways, the channels are a bit more open. You've also got to be careful, and this is the case more in the Christian era as well, where demons might be walking around. This is the Christianization of perhaps earlier pagan remnants about the Sidhe, or spirits of the dead, or fairies, or things like that, discarnate entities. So you've got to be very, very careful, and there's certain things you can do. You might put crosses or candles outside your house, or you might wander around with a jack-o'-lantern, or light some sort of effigy outside to keep away evil. This goes right back arguably to Indo-European practices of these same fire festivals I'm talking about, which maybe would have been ritual and purification rites, perhaps to purify livestock before it's slaughtered. So as I said, in Irish, Samhain refers to the whole month of November, which is when our livestock, our farming ancestors would have been slaughtering livestock. In Anglo-Saxon England, this month was called Blood Month. Again, a reference to a very similar thing. So it's just practically the time of year when you would be slaughtering animals that you wouldn't want to feed through the year, and obviously you would be having a feast of the leftovers. In ancient times, you would also be offering those to various deities to keep you safe through the dark months. So what we see here is ancient practices around fire festivals and sacrifice and warding off spirits of evil, travelling through into the Middle Ages, where they take on different connotations, but still at the root there's a similar feel. There's a similar feel that this is a gateway time, a similar feel that there's stuff out there that either needs attracting or keeping away from us, and that is still, I feel, in the folk holiday today. It might be worth mentioning in the UK, obviously if you're from Britain you know about this, if you're from the US you might not, there's a secular day around this time of year called Bonfire Night or Guy Fawkes Night. It's where we get a big bonfire and set fire to Catholics, or specifically one Catholic, Guy Fawkes, who tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament. Some say he was the last honest man to enter Parliament. It's really raining now. I don't know if you can hear the rain on the roof. But I find it interesting that this custom emerged when other, perhaps pagan echoes of fire festivals were dying out, and then filling that niche, a new secular one came in, where we're still burning, we're banishing a boogeyman, in this case a Catholic, and obviously there are a lot of effigies of witches and actual witches put on bonfires at this time as well, so again warding off evil. It's interesting to know, in more of the Anglo-Saxon imagination, when something bad happens to your crops, your cattle, it's usually the work of a witch, whereas in more of the Celtic imagination, it's the work of the Sidhe or the fairies. So just a difference there, but a similar belief, just a different nuance to it. And I think we can see the sort of Christian worldview starting to come behind there with the demonization of the witch that carried on for so many centuries. So in terms of practices and things you can do at this time of year that might be a bit more rooted in authentic practices of our ancestors, as well as rooted to the natural world, this is a gathering time. Have a gathering, have some people around, or just have a good time. If you brew cider, make some delicious, tasty cider. This is last year's brew. I will be drinking this for Samhain, for Halloween. I'll probably be making some mulled cider. Make an offering of that drink to an altar where you have some pictures of your ancestors. This is very interesting because this is also a tradition in the Mexican Day of the Dead that has a lot of similarities with with Samhain as well, and a similar thing has gone on here, a merging of European Christian practice with some maybe European pre-Christian resonances buried in there, going over to the New World and mixing with new ideas there, specifically indigenous Mexican ideas. But this idea of lighting candles for pictures of your deceased resonates very, 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 very strongly with ancient practices in Britain and Ireland, and indeed other parts of Europe. So what we always see here is pagan remnants just going through, and it's not always the same. There's always slightly different things. There's regional variations and variations through time, but essentially there's this is a liminal time. This is the beginning of winter. This is a time for feasting and celebration, and this is the time of the dead and spirits of the other side, paying homage to them, inviting recent spirits of the departed maybe into our homes or to our hearth, feasting and lighting a very big Samhain fire, sometimes two. Sometimes you walk between the two to purify yourself. That's sometimes more of a Beltane thing, but also for Samhain. The folklore around Samhain is very, very interesting as well. In the Irish mythological tradition, there's a story about Ailín, who is one of the Sidhe, a demon, a demonic entity from the other side, that every year for I think 24 years on Samhain night came to the palace of Tara, where the high kings of Ireland dwelt, which probably would have been a wooden kind of Iron Age round fort. And Ailín came in the night playing his fairy music and put all the Irish warriors to sleep, all the warriors of the Fionn asleep, and then with fire from his mouth he burned down all the turrets and fortresses of Tara, burned Tara to the ground. And this happened year after year after year until the young hero Fionn McCool came along. You might have heard of him, and he got some information on Ailín, and he learned that this fairy music would put him to sleep. So he got a spear, a magic spear, and he stuck it in his own forehead so he stayed awake, and then he killed Ailín with this spear, so breaking the curse. But it's interesting that this happens on Samhain, on the Celtic feast day of Samhain, a time of celebration, that this demon of the Sidhe comes and burns the place down. So the Sidhe present there, and also this fairy music and a demonic presence that needs to be averted. So that baked into very old Irish literary tradition, which is probably based on much earlier pagan sources. So that coming right on through there. Trick-or-treating, a custom with probably very, very ancient origins, both pagan and Christian. So soul cakes, in the Christian kind of borrowing of this festival, where Christianity sort of put a holiday here, arguably because there was a kind of more of a pagan themed thing happening. So the early church, I think this was in the 8th century, wanted to kind of put a holiday here, and they called it All Souls Day. And then before that, All Hallows Day, and then All Hallows Eve the night before, where we get the word Halloween from. But this concept of going door to door, singing for souls of the dead, see again a resonance with the pagan worldview there, preceding it, for these little soul cakes that would be given to these well wishers that would go from door to door, a bit like the tradition today. There's also, of course, the tradition with dressing up, that this is a way, again, as I've already said, of scaring away evil spirits. Also, the evil spirits don't recognise that you're not one of them because you're dressed like this. That's one of the customs anyway. Also the tradition of guising and mummers, which is a kind of theatrical play that happens in a lot of villages and streets still in this country, probably based on sort of archetypal imagery and cosmic based rituals of our forefathers, if we go way back in time. So this theme of dressing up is a very, very, very old one indeed. So, my friends, there's way too much to talk about for the traditions of Halloween or Samhain to really fit into a video. I just wanted to give you some sort of idea of some of the older customs here, and maybe some ways that you can kind of get in touch with the maybe slightly older versions of this festival. I know some people out there dress up as sort of Spider-Man or Donald Trump. That's fine, but it's all about coming together, feasting, lighting those fires, paying your respects to the dead, and if you're that way inclined, sort of maybe doing some work with aspects of the other side. I'll probably be spending some time with my mum this year, who's buried on the farm. She passed away last year. If you want to know more about maybe the idea of contact with spirits of the dead, particularly the recently departed, I made a video about that about this time last year, where I felt Mum was really kind of making her voice heard a bit. So I'll put a link to that video now if you want, or if you just want to hear a nice old Celtic story about witches and cauldrons, I'll put a link to some Celtic folklore. Thank you very much for listening, guys. See you again soon.
So much fun to hang out, but with something to do.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like, yeah, not just like sitting, drinking, and chatting. Like, actually have like a little side project to be working.